chatting about this last week or so in the Arsenal world. I'm going to start at the Newcastle game over the weekend, and then some of the feelings I had leading up to the Champions League. And I'll be honest, I'm new in this, relatively new in this content creation space, and so sometimes I try to not talk too much when my emotions are high. And I'll be honest, my feelings have been a little bit high, with obviously the loss at Manchester City, which meant Arsenal had lost 4 of 6 games at that point, 1 draw, 1 win. And but the win was a really crucial win, which was the win away at Sporting, which kept the season alive in the Champions League. And the draw was also in the Champions League, and then obviously 2 losses in domestic cups, and then 2 losses in the league to Bournemouth and Man City. So, it's hard not to feel anything high at that point, but like I tend to not have a public meltdown. I do have meltdowns, trust me, but I'm not yet at a place where I feel comfortable enough doing that in public, so I don't. However, the last week or so has been an improvement in terms of results, and I think Arsenal played well in the Champions League yesterday, but at the weekend against Newcastle played okay. I think the solidity, the clean sheet, was helpful over the weekend. I don't know what the solution is to the struggles of like really finding goals in this team. We've just gone through a month or so of 1 goal a game or no goals in some of the games. And we've been conceding more. So I guess the positive in the last week is that Arsenal played 2 games and conceded 1 goal. And I don't mean that in a pejorative way. I just mean that as an Arsenal fan, it's just one of those things where it's like, okay, you have wiggle room in the Champions League because it's 2-legged tie, so you don't have to win every game there. But in the Premier League, as Arteta said beautifully before the Newcastle game, he said new season, 5 games, win game 1. So they won game 1, and my worry in that was going into that game and coming out of the game was that Arsenal were very much going after that very good performance at Manchester City. But the problem was 30 minutes into that game, you lose Kai Havertz. And then 52, 53 minutes into that game, you lose Eberechi Eze, which means you're forced into making 2 substitutions right before halftime and soon after halftime. And hey guys, thank you for joining. I'm recording live, and so just thought I would do it this way. But yeah, long story short, it's just one of them whereby you have a team that's really trying really hard on the pitch. So I feel bad, to be critical of them, and I'm not going to be critical of the boys' effort. But I do worry about where they are legs wise, the minutes that they've played, and what they're able to do versus teams, for example, who play once a week, like Newcastle, like Bournemouth, and most teams that Arsenal will be playing in the remaining games in the Premier League, they'll be playing once a week too. So but you can't feel sorry for yourself because you want to be in these competitions. You want to be in April playing meaningful games at the winning end of the competition. So it's really, really difficult to feel sorry for yourself when you're in this situation. You just got to find a way to make it work. And I think the team is finding ways to make it work, but they're also limping. And so whenever we've faced quality opposition, it's shown, right? Man City, for example, it showed, and Bournemouth, who had a very long 20 plus day rest before playing Arsenal, it showed, right? And I heard Atleti's coach yesterday saying the same thing after the game, like, they are going to try and capitalize on the fact that Arsenal is playing intense games every 3 days. However, I still back Arsenal to take care of business in the Champions League because I think they are a better team than Atleti. Um, However, it's not going to be pretty, and that's kind of like what I've had to come to terms with as an Arsenal fan and as a football fan. I watched the game against Newcastle, a game that Arsenal had chances to score a second goal here and there, but the execution was poor on the day. And the key thing is that they didn't concede a goal. It could have been 1-1. It could have been 2-3-1 because Arsenal didn't deserve to lose that game against Newcastle. But Newcastle was stubborn as an opponent on the given day, and they could have equalized through Johan Wissa, and he missed from about 7-8 yards. Can happen in a football match. Strikers miss chances. Gyökeres misses an opportunity to pass Saka through or Martinelli through on goal. And yeah, the game ended 1-0. Didn't give a lot of Arsenal fans a lot of confidence, including myself. But I watched it again outside of the feelings of watching it live, and there was a lot of things that the team did well. They did find openings, and Odegaard was doing Odegaard things, and it was not as bad a performance as it felt live. And I think there's going to be a lot of that when we watch these games now between now and the end of May. There's going to be a lot of emotions that shade the way we feel about what we sing. We haven't been in a title race proper for 2 years, and before that, it was a very long time, right? Because I think last year was not a real title race, really. Liverpool had won the league by this time, and the last time we were in a title race, it was with Manchester City, unfortunately. And they know how to do this better than Arsenal. As a result, I feel they have the edge now in the Premier League because they know how to navigate this time of the year better than we do. And I think they're playing their better football at the right time of the season. We are limping. I hope we can find a way to limp across the line and stay with them and maybe pip them to the finish line. But I don't know, and unless somebody is going to miraculously find their goal scoring boots in this Arsenal team, I don't know how this is going to happen. Really, it's going to be. I'll take 4-5-1 nils between now and the end of the season, like 4 in the league and 1 in the Champions League. I'll take 1 in the next round, and I'll take another 1-0 in the final if we in the final, right? A lot of people are talking about goal difference. I don't think Arsenal wins this on goal difference. They're going to need somebody to do a favor for them against Manchester City, and they're just going to need to win out their games. I don't think our forwards at this point are forwards you can really trust to score you many goals. Maybe they'll have an explosion in 1 or 2 games, but I'm not waiting for that at this point. I'm just waiting on the defense to continue to be what bails Arsenal out of situations, and I'm waiting for the games to be ugly and close and uncomfortable for the watching fan and paying fan at the stadium. And fair play to the fans, by the way, at the stadium at the weekend because they were really good with the team. I just don't know, like if this team has it in them to be swashbuckling at this point. I think we have the talent to be that way, but even the players we get back look to be extremely exhausted. The players were huffing and puffing at the end of the Newcastle game. And I saw a 15 to 20 minute spell in the Champions League game against Atleti that also looked as if the team was really struggling to keep up with Atleti once they up the tempo and up the ante in the game. So I just don't know if there's going to be a 3-0 in this team, or a 4-0 or 4-1 in Champions League or the Premier League, if I'm being honest. And at this point, I'm just hoping that the team just wins their games, and then we live with the outcome. Unfortunately, we've allowed Manchester City back into the room, and they're feeling themselves, and they playing good stuff, man. Cherky, Semenyo, Gehi at the back. With Kusanov, who's also finding himself a bit more of a confident player right now. Bernardo Silva is running the show with Rodri. I haven't even named Erling Haaland, and they have a bench that you can count on. So, and Arsenal has more and more and more and more unhealthy players playing starting minutes. I know Nani Madueke gets a lot of flack from Arsenal fans, but I think I'm thankful for him. I'm thankful for Gyökeres, who has 19 goals for Arsenal, 4 penalties, or something like that. But he's our leading scorer, and he's a clunky player to watch, and it's uncomfortable sometimes watching him play football. But you can't be a snob and like dismiss what this guy is doing for the team. I say to my friends when I talk about him, he's got top class mentality, but his footballing ability, unfortunately, can't match that. And I think in Martinelli, there's another player who is that way inclined, in my opinion. His attitude is top class. It's a coach's dream, but in terms of what he can give you at this level, like there are levels to this, and my way of describing it is basically going to Tuesday Champions League game, right? You have Bayern Munich against PSG, and in the front six positions, I think in both the teams that played yesterday, which is Atleti and Arsenal, only one player could get into Bayern or PSG's front three positions. Only one, and that's Julian Alvarez. Julian Alvarez could start. You could see it that he starts in those teams. Maybe not all the time. He starts for Arsenal all the time. If he plays for Arsenal, just like he does for Atleti, he starts all the time. So I didn't expect. I guess I'm transitioning now into the Champions League. I didn't expect to see, the kind of game we saw in the PSG versus Paris game. I mean, sorry, Paris versus Bayern game, right? Like that game ended 5-4, and it was a spectacle, like a football classic, a Champions League classic instantly. And I saw numbers spoken about that, like, it's never been seen that in a semifinal leg, not over two legs, but like in one leg, that there were 9 goals scored. And to see it be, 5-4 versus like a 7-2 or an 8-1, that's even crazier, to be honest, because you can see a blowout, but usually, that because like maybe one team has got a lot of injuries or a couple of red cards, or it's a mismatch when one team got lucky to get to that level, and then the other one was just like, you know dominant and clicking. But to see two teams that are nearly flawless in their construction both concede 4 goals or more in a game, and there's only one goal in it going into the second leg, that's that's something else. You know what I mean? Like that's like really, it's one of those weird ones. I was speaking earlier on, I think, Tuesday night, saying it's very rare that you can see two teams concede 5 and 4 goals in one game, and you can't really be too critical of the goalkeeper and the defenders, but only be in awe of the offensive talent that was on show. And that's what happened on Tuesday. We saw a game with free flowing attacking football. And yet, if you listen to Diego Simeone's comments about that PSG Bayern game, he's like, yes, everybody loved that game, but as a coach, you know, and of course, if you've seen Simeone coach and you follow his teams, you know that he is a guy who doesn't like a 5-4. He prefers what people saw in the Arsenal Atletico game, which was a 1-1 game, a little bit of a scrap, you know, pitch heavily watered on top of the rainstorm that was there, and top of like the pitch being cut in a little weird way. There's a lot of how do I say, there's a lot of different ways football can be played, right? And I thought I was going to not enjoy the Arsenal game, but I did. You know, there was a bit of ag, and it's a bit old school, you know, Champions League semi-final, and the Spanish fans were up for it. The Atleti home players were on the referees. It was a lot of ag and a lot of like, you know, so-called dark arts in that game. A lot of like football purist stuff that, you know, if you're a football purist, you wouldn't enjoy watching that game. But because my team was playing, I watched, right? And even as an Arsenal fan, I have to be honest that the footballing standard and the quality of game was better in the Bayern and PSG game. So I don't want to, you know, be too critical of the 1-1 draw, because like as an Arsenal fan, you take that and you go to London next week and hopefully you can see it out, right? But I saw an Arsenal team play, you know, show a backbone away in a very hostile environment. Um, Comfortable in the first half for the most part, and even though Griezmann and Lookman and Alvarez did show threat throughout the entirety of the match. I think they probably were the forwards who played the best game, and it makes sense that Griezmann was man of the match. It is ripe old age now. I think this is his last season, and actually, I know this is his last season, and he's going to be coming to the MLS. I think Orlando or somewhere in Florida. So to see him, Lookman, and and Alvarez, who looked like he's playing through something. I learned that he hasn't played any La Liga minutes since before the March international break. So I guess right about early March was the last time he played minutes in La Liga. And these teams are able to do this, which makes me again worry about, you know, Arsenal's ability to live with some of them. Unfortunately, I think Atleti, I may live to regret these words. I think Atleti's quality in depth is not as maybe as good as a Bayern or a PSG. And hopefully, Arsenal, having made some changes to their front line, are able to go into the Fulham match enjoying a degree of you know, rotation. Saka didn't start this game. I don't think he's fit to start this weekend, if you ask me, because he was out for over a month, and then he played about 10, 15 minutes at the weekend, and then he played about maybe 20 minutes, 25 minutes if you add the 7 minutes of additional time at the end. So I don't know if Saka is fit to start on Saturday. So Noni would be, you know, again having to play, which was interesting because he looked very unhappy to come off yesterday. I don't know what that was about, but I do hope that that he's fine and he can start again, and Saka can come on from the bench, because I just don't think we should be overworking players like Saka at this point. And I think somebody like um, what's his name, Kai Havertz, probably not going to be back, and so you need to lean into Victor again, unless you're going to go false nine, maybe play Eze. Um, Play Eze maybe in the, you know, in the false nine position, maybe with Odegaard behind him, or maybe we just play with, you know, 4-2-4 with two tens, Eze and Odegaard, and then you can play someone else on the left wing. It's going to be interesting to see how Arteta chops this one up. But like the game against Atleti will have taken something out of these boys because it was intense, especially in the second half, and the pitch was heavy, and it looks like the grass was left to be a bit long as well on purpose. So and then you add travel to that. So that means the boys are getting back to England today, probably, or they're already back, but they're getting back to England on Thursday. Probably won't do anything but recover tomorrow, and then today, and then maybe a short training session tomorrow and play on Saturday. So I think, yeah, man, I think it's going to be interesting to see like how Ateta and the coaching staff navigate this one. See, it's good to see Calafiore on the bench. Nkapie is a good left back, and he's done really well. But can he keep going every 3 days? That's one to watch. Ben White, there's cover there in Mosquera at the moment. I'm losing hope that we'll see Timber before the middle of May at this point. And that's unfortunate because he's a really, really good defender, especially when you're playing players like Lookman and who are nippy and who are very tricky. And then of course, if you make it to the final, you're going to be playing Luis Diaz, you're going to be playing Varaskelia, one of them two, Bacola, lots of high octane talent in those two teams in Bayern and PSG. So the long and short of it is, it doesn't feel as nice as many people would have thought it would feel to be in the semi-final of the Champions League and to be 4 games away possibly from being champion of England too. Needing a favor from somewhere, and I don't know. Manchester City look like they're gonna win every game they play this time of the year, and I feel for Arsenal. I really do, because I know there's a lot of talk about squad depth, and it's true, but I think it's the depth that's been able to hold the season together. But but that's because Arsenal haven't really had their options available to them. Like they've had Ben White unfit when Timber was being overplayed, and then now Ben White is being played into fitness because Timber can't play at all. And the same thing is true at left back. It's been like on and changing there. And then in midfield, you can criticize for sure. Like what's his name? Declan Rice and Martin Zubimendi have been used like way more than I think any of us would have liked. And fortunately, neither of them have been badly injured, because I don't know what would have been of this season if either of them had to miss 3 weeks, to be honest. And knock on wood, that doesn't happen at this point, because I do think, yeah, Mikel Arteta would have had a big problem, because it seems like he does not rate Christian Norgard. It doesn't seem like he rates Norgard at all. And Miles Lewis-Skelly only got minutes at the weekend in midfield, when Zubimendi was unwell. Like it turns out he had an illness. Yeah, I hope so too, man. I hope they can sign a player the quality of Julian Alvarez. Alvarez is a talent that that would raise the ceiling of this Arsenal squad, no question. Even Lookman, I don't know if Lookman will leave after joining in January, but like, yeah, Arsenal's problem is quality up top. Bukayo Saka obviously is a player I rate and rate really highly, but he's not well. He hasn't been well. He's been playing, through Achilles injuries, and two hamstrings last year, and he's done a lot for this team. And at this point, it looks like we need someone else to step in, right? Yeah, cheers, man. Like I agree with you, bro. I agree. Like I think Alvarez is top level, and I think Arsenal need to just not buy another defender this winter. I know Arteta will find a way to buy a right back or something. But if I'm under Alberta and the Arsenal board, I'm saying, bro, fix this midfield and fix those front positions. Like I know Zubimendi and Rice won't be able to do this again next year. One, if not both of them, are gonna need to be supported massively next season, especially with both of them going to the World Cup and both of them likely to go deep in the World Cup. They're likely to go deep in the World Cup. And I just think we need help there. You know, the squad construction is what I will question. Arteta obviously has to answer some questions too, in terms of like how he's used his resources. I think the reluctance to use Christian Norgard and Miles more, in the earlier parts of the season, I think the reluctance to use those players and the reluctance to maybe even use Mosquera, to support Timber, is the reason we're paying the price in April. I think that question is a fair one to be pointed in his direction, because Arteta has been in Arsenal since December 2019, and every springtime, Arsenal has not looked strong in the spring, except the one season in the 23-24 season, when we lost to Bayern in the quarterfinals of the Champions League and lost the Premier League by 2 points to Man City. So I do think he has, there's fair criticism or questions in Arteta's direction if people want to talk about how he uses certain players a bit too much and underuses certain players like way too much. I I don't think it's a coincidence that Pep and Man City do this in the spring and Arsenal do this in the spring. You know what I mean? Like I think Pep is prepared to lose points earlier in the season to make sure that he has figured out like the best way to look after his boys. He looks after his players. And yes, he does have a machine behind him. I'm not gonna, ignore that. He has a machine behind him that has unlimited resources that can just go and buy flipping Semenyo in January or flipping buy, Mark Gahey in January. No problem. After they'd bought him 12 players for the previous 12 months, right? They did a big cash stash in January of 2025 too, when they bought Mamouche for 70 plus million pounds. Nico Gonzalez, like these are bench players, 60 million pounds from Portugal, right? Like they do this. Kusanov, like, was another big punt. It's paying out in the second half of this season, but like that's a January 2025 signing. So City can do panic buys that they can't suffer from. We miss on the transfer market as Arsenal. You buy a Gyökeres instead of I don't even know which forward could have been bought by Arsenal that would have improved them last year, not named Alvarez or Isaac, right? Maybe Ekitike. But we tried to haggle and we didn't like the numbers in the Sesko deal, the bonuses and all of that, including wages. So we pivoted and went to a Gyökeres who's more mature, who maybe looked like more of a sure thing. But now, that's what we have. We know this guy can't really play football away from the 18-yard box. Not really. He can do it in flashes, like yesterday when he runs half of the pitch and tries to play Odegaard in, who should have done better. But outside of like counter-attacking moments, it's hard for me to see Gyökeres being a value add in this Arsenal team when we are trying to dominate the ball. And it makes sense actually that, at Atletico we did struggle in that, especially when they started coming on to us. We did struggle finding outlets because we didn't have our ball playing forward players on the pitch. In Martinelli, Madueke, and Gyökeres, you have three guys who rank in the top 10 in the Premier League for losing the ball. They rank in the top 10, with Gyökeres being number one at like losing the ball for every 100 touches. I mean, every 100 times he loses possession, he's losing it at a 43% rate. It's almost 50%. He loses possession at nearly 50%. That's too high for a team that's trying to dominate the ball. And Martinelli and Madueke are both in the high 30s too. So yeah, it's a very very difficult time in a way because like, I don't mean difficult as in like you're fighting relegation, right? Like, this is not that, but it's a difficult one because like you're watching these boys like putting their hearts out and playing and leaving it all on the pitch, and it looks like they're just doing enough. And yet, it doesn't seem like help is coming at the moment because too many of our better players in street clothes in April again, and something needs to be checked out there this summer. And I don't know who. You can't fire the entire medical team, you can't fire your coaching staff or on things of that nature, but like something needs to be looked at for sure. You can't continue to have this problem. And even when I say Arteta needs to watch out for minutes and things of that sort, I do think sometimes the injuries are the reason he's having to overuse certain players. I can give that as an excuse or as an explanation, but sometimes as well, I do think he creates his own problems. So, like, to what extent? That's another question. He and the Cronkies are going to have to look at, right? Like, to what extent is he the Tom Thibodeau or the Marcelo Bielsa in this situation? I think it's a significant enough level of him doing stuff as well, even though I don't think he's 100% to blame for it all. But everybody needs to look at how they can improve this, because you can't continue to think you can win when your best players are not available in winning time. Look at PSG again, clicking at winning time. And I know they play in leagues where they can move fixtures around and whatnot, and they play in leagues where they've already won the league come the springtime, and so they can focus on the Champions League. Arsenal don't have that luxury, and no team in England does. So they deserve praise for that. But at the same time, like, people are going to get tired of giving participation medals, because that's what it starts to feel like, which is a bit ungrateful for us fans maybe to feel that way. But over time, like, you become a victim of your own success. And I think that's what's happening with Arteta, which is why there are fans, not me, who are talking about even if he wins the league, he should leave because messages become stale. I don't think the messages become stale because these boys still fight for this manager. I really do think that they do that. I think they fight for this manager, but I think the problem for him is figuring out a way of making sure that his best players are available, because this is not a coincidence now. And I'm going to leave this one there about the injuries because I do think it's very obvious and everybody knows about it, but I think sometimes it's under discussed and is underestimated as a thing that sabotages and it inhibits the ability to get over the line. And I'm saying it's actually something that needs to be looked at even more, because we are aware of it, but I think people have gotten to a place of like, no excuses, just do it, which you can't really. You can't. We saw what happened to City last year when they lost Rodri. So anyway, Fulham the weekend, it's all to play for. Tricky opponent. They play good football, but they come into the Emirates and they're gonna be stubborn, And if Arsenal forwards don't take whatever little chances they're going to get, it's going to be a long day. Let's hope that for everybody's sake that the boys will take their chances, because they got to. They got to take their chances. If they don't take their chances, it's going to be a long, long, long day. And, don't nobody want that. Don't nobody want that. And I'm going to say cheerio.